The alarm bells are screaming, and while Anthony Albanese sleeps at the wheel, Shadow Defense Industry Minister Jacinta Nampijinpa Price just delivered the most bone-chilling warning about Australia's national security that should have every Australian absolutely terrified. What she revealed at the Darwin Bush Summit isn't just political rhetoric, it's a desperate cry for help as our nation faces an existential threat that Labour refuses to acknowledge. Price didn't just criticise the government, she exposed a catastrophic failure of leadership that could cost Australian lives. While Beijing's war machine churns at full capacity, building military bases like they are McDonald's franchises across the Indo-Pacific, our Prime Minister is more concerned with his approval ratings than protecting Australian sovereignty. The Shadow Defence Minister's words weren't a political attack, they were a national emergency broadcast that every Australian needs to hear. Standing in Darwin, the strategic epicenter of our northern defences, Price delivered a message so urgent, so absolutely critical, that it should be front-page news across every newspaper in the country. But guess what? The mainstream media is burying this story because they don't want you to know how vulnerable we really are. They don't want you to understand that while you're worried about grocery prices, Chinese military commanders are literally drawing up battle plans for regional dominance. Price's central warning was devastating in its simplicity: we need to start taking defense seriously. 4 words that expose the Albanese government's complete failure to protect Australian families. This wasn't diplomatic language, this was a shadow minister practically begging the current government to wake up before it's too late. When a senior coalition defense spokesperson uses language this stark, this urgent, you know we're facing a crisis that goes beyond normal political disagreements. The timing of Price's intervention couldn't be more critical, and here's why every Australian should be absolutely furious. While she's standing in Darwin, literally at the front line of our northern security perimeter, warning about Chinese military expansion, Labour politicians are probably attending wine tastings in Canberra. Darwin isn't just another city, it's Australia's eyes and ears watching over the region where Chinese warships now patrol like they own the place. What Price revealed about Chinese Communist Party ambitions should send shivers down your spine. We're not talking about trade disputes or diplomatic disagreements, we're talking about a totalitarian regime with the stated goal of dominating the entire Indo-Pacific region. That means your region, your waters, your future. Beijing's military strategists aren't playing games, they are executing a comprehensive plan for regional hegemony that treats Australian sovereignty like a minor inconvenience. The Chinese military expansion Price referenced isn't happening in some distant part of the world, it's happening in our backyard. While Australian families struggle with cost of living pressures, Beijing has been constructing artificial islands and turning them into military fortresses. They've been expanding naval operations through international waters that Australia depends on for trade and security. They've been building military partnerships specifically designed to limit Australia's strategic options. Price's warning about Labour's inadequate response reveals something absolutely infuriating. Our current government apparently thinks strongly worded diplomatic statements can stop Chinese warships. While Beijing invests hundreds of billions in military capabilities designed to project power across the Indo-Pacific, Albanese's response has been to increase defense spending by amounts that wouldn't buy a decent second-hand car. The shadow minister's emphasis on defense spending isn't about political point scoring, it's about mathematical reality. China's military budget has increased exponentially while Australia debates whether we can afford proper defense capabilities. We're bringing diplomatic protests to what could become a shooting war. Price understands what Labour refuses to acknowledge: military deterrence requires actual military capability, not good intentions and international law. Here's what's absolutely maddening about Labour's response to these warnings: they'll probably dismiss Price's concerns as fear-mongering or playing politics with national security. But when Chinese military activities intensify every month, when Beijing openly discusses timeline for regional dominance, when intelligence assessments consistently highlight growing threats, dismissing these warnings isn't just political negligence, it's potential treason against Australian interests. Price's reference to Chinese desires for regional domination reflects intelligence that should terrify every Australian parent thinking about their children's future. Beijing's strategic documents openly discuss timeframes for achieving military superiority across the Indo-Pacific. Their military exercises simulate scenarios involving conflict with Western allies. Their propaganda repeatedly emphasizes the need to challenge American and Australian influence in the region. The shadow minister's call for urgency comes as Chinese military capabilities reach levels that fundamentally alter regional power balances. Beijing now possesses hypersonic missiles that can strike targets across the Indo-Pacific faster than existing defense systems can respond. Their naval expansion includes aircraft carriers, advanced submarines, and missile systems specifically designed to deny access to foreign militaries in Chinese-claimed waters. What Price understands, and what Labour apparently doesn't, is that military deterrence works through strength, not wishful thinking. China's strategists respect power and calculate costs versus benefits when considering aggressive actions. If Australia appears weak, unprepared, or unwilling to defend its interests, Beijing's calculations shift toward viewing aggressive action as low risk, high reward. The coalition's defense philosophy that Price represents emphasizes maintaining technological and operational advantages over potential adversaries. This isn't warmongering, it's basic strategic common sense. Australia's geography means we cannot rely on allies arriving quickly enough to prevent initial aggression. Our defense capabilities must be sufficient to deter attack and defend territory independently until reinforcements arrive. Price's criticism of Labour's budgetary priorities reveals something absolutely outrageous. While facing the greatest military threat since World War II, the current government treats defense spending like optional luxury rather than existential necessity. They are literally choosing domestic political popularity over national survival. They are gambling Australian lives on the hope that international law and diplomatic pressure will restrain totalitarian regimes. The Shadow Minister's emphasis on Australian sovereignty addresses something Labour seems willing to compromise: our nation's ability to act independently in our own strategic interests. Price recognises that effective defence policy requires Australia to maintain sufficient military capability to make independent decisions rather than becoming junior partner in someone else's strategic calculations. Chinese military planners study Australian defence capabilities and political resolve when developing their regional strategies. If they perceive weakness, indecision, or unwillingness to invest in serious defense capabilities, their strategic calculations shift toward viewing Australian territory and interests as achievable objectives rather than prohibitive targets. Price's Darwin speech location wasn't coincidental, it was symbolic recognition that Northern Australia represents our most vulnerable and strategically critical region. Darwin's strategic importance means it's likely already on Chinese military targeting lists. The Shadow Minister chose to deliver her warning from the place most likely to face initial aggression in any regional conflict. The Chinese Communist Party's military doctrine explicitly includes scenarios involving conflict with Western allies including Australia. Their military exercises regularly simulate attacks on targets matching Australian strategic infrastructure. Their propaganda consistently portrays Australia as an American client state requiring liberation from Western influence. This isn't paranoia, it's documented reality. Price's warnings about Chinese military intensification reflect intelligence assessments suggesting Beijing views current global conditions as strategically advantageous for asserting greater regional control. Chinese strategists believe Western allies are distracted by multiple international crises and may lack resolve for sustained military confrontation in the Indo-Pacific. The Shadow Minister's call for increased defense spending addresses capability gaps that could prove fatal in regional crisis. Australia currently lacks sufficient long-range strike capabilities to deter Chinese aggression against regional partners. Our naval forces cannot sustain prolonged operations across the distances required for effective Indo-Pacific deterrence. Our air defense systems have significant gaps in coverage areas critical for protecting population centers and strategic infrastructure. Labour's response to these warnings will probably include references to diplomatic engagement and international cooperation. But Price understands what history teaches: diplomatic solutions work only when backed by credible military deterrence. China's leadership respects strength and exploits perceived weakness. Diplomatic engagement without military backing is capitulation disguised as statesmanship. The Shadow Minister's emphasis on urgency reflects timing considerations that Labour seems unwilling to acknowledge. Chinese military modernization programs operate on specific timelines designed to achieve regional superiority before Western allies can adequately respond. Every month of inadequate Australian defence investment reduces our strategic options and increases Beijing's confidence in aggressive action. Price's warning about compromised national security speaks to intelligence assessments suggesting Chinese military capabilities now exceed thresholds for successful regional aggression. Beijing possesses sufficient military power to achieve initial objectives before effective resistance can be organized. This capability shift fundamentally alters strategic calculations across the Indo-Pacific. What makes Price's intervention absolutely crucial is her willingness to speak truth that career politicians avoid. While Labour focuses on poll numbers and media management, she's highlighting existential threats that require immediate, dramatic policy changes. Her message isn't politically convenient, but it's strategically essential for Australian survival. The Chinese military's recent activities include expanded patrols through international waters near Australian territory, increased cooperation with regional partners that could limit Australian strategic flexibility, and development of weapons systems specifically designed to deny access to foreign militaries in Chinese-claimed areas. These aren't defensive measures, they are preparation for offensive operations. Price's call for treating defense seriously addresses cultural and political attitudes that view military preparation as unnecessary or provocative. But deterrence theory and historical precedent demonstrate that military weakness invites aggression while military strength preserves peace. China's leadership calculates risks and benefits. Adequate Australian defense capability shifts their calculations toward peaceful coexistence. The Shadow Minister's Darwin speech represents more than political criticism. It's a final warning before strategic circumstances make effective response impossible. Once regional military balances shift decisively toward Chinese dominance, Australia's options reduce to either submission or costly, potentially unsuccessful resistance. Price understands that prevention through deterrence is vastly preferable to conflict through weakness. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Australian News CC family where the real stories come to life. See you in the next one.